To debate this issue, I'm joined now by Mike Treen, the National Director of Organising for the Unite Union, and David Lowe from the Employers and Manufacturers Association. Well, first up to both of you. Employers say jobs have been created by the scheme. Unions say that's simply not the case. Obviously, someone has got their numbers wrong. David, why would jobs actually be created by something like this?
Well, we do know that employers are taking on staff sooner rather than later. We know of apprentices that have been hired that otherwise wouldn't have been hired. We know of employers that had jobs vacant. It was just too difficult to fill it, and they're taking on...
That doesn't ring true. If you've got a job, you'd fill the job, whether this was in place or not, wouldn't you?
No, not necessarily, because actually employing people is relatively risky. It's very, very difficult if it doesn't work out to actually be able to fix it. And so what employers do is they put it off. And what this is really about is about creating opportunities so that employers will hire sooner rather than later.
Mike, the numbers are fairly resounding. 60% of New Zealanders say this is on the right track. What's the fear for workers that this is so wrong?
Well, the fear for workers, I think, is that most people think that these laws are allowing people to do something. What they're actually saying is they're disallowing workers the right to appeal. So it's not giving employers the right to employ. Employers already have the right to employ. They're employing hundreds of thousands of people every year without any difficulty. What it stops is somebody opposing an unfair action. So it's legalising currently illegal practices. It's making legal a dismissal for standing up for your rights, for demanding, as one worker we had, asking for their breaks.
But things like meal breaks and that they're in law anyway. Shouldn't they go above and beyond this?
But the problem, yes, this worker was asking for their legally entitled meal break in a job, but they did it within the 90 days. They were in an employment situation which is a small employer, less than 20 members. They were already covered by the 90-day law. They asked for their break time, which is a legal entitlement, and they were sacked the next day. They drew the connection.
What do you say to that? Is that a typical example of people who are within that 90-day, make a bit of noise, and within 90 days they're out the door? Is that what you're hearing?
No, it's not at all typical.
I suspect not.
And what I would also have to say is that people are entitled to their legal entitlements, and if that is the reason for a dismissal, then they do have a right to take a case. No. The right to not taking a case is about the dismissal itself. It's not for being put out because you have other obligations. But what people need to understand...
You can't oppose the dismissal.
Hang on, Mike, you need to let me finish. What people, I think, understand when they say that 60% support this law is it's just a commonplace law right around the world. I mean, over in Australia, where we have a Labour government, they have a 6-month trial period. 90 days in New Zealand is very conservative, and I think people see that for what it is.
They have many other laws in Australia that provide other protections that counterbalance what the law around that. We don't have those sort of laws. We don't have those sort of protections. If this law that's existed so far has created jobs, why is unemployment rising? All it does is shift who may possibly be offered a job. There may be some shuffling around that level as to who may possibly be offered a job, but it removes the employment rights of hundreds of thousands of workers for that first 3 months of employment. And it allows employers to do things that would not be acceptable to most people in New Zealand society. And when they see that, I'm sure that they're going to... I'm actually quite pleased that 36% are actually opposed to it. I think that number can only go up as the stories...
It's only a third, though, at this point, and 2/3 are for it.
It's because most people think that it only applies to the people that John Key was talking about, that it applies to the new migrant, that it applies to the worker who's never had a job. They don't realise that it applies to 400,000 people who get a job each year, effectively.
So what's your scenario? A shorter trial period, no trial period, a longer trial period, what? Because if you're an employer and you're saddled with a poor employee, you should have a
be able to remove them from employment, which you can do under current law. Most people, when they start jobs, operate. There's a 3-month probation period, which is provided for in law. If you can't perform, if you can't do the job, you can be terminated at the end of the probation period. That's acceptable. There is no protection for people who can't do the job properly.
Oh, that just isn't right. There is no 3-month trial period provided in law. This trial period is actually what the government is proposing, is to bring in this 90-day trial period.
A probationary period is
Mike, you
provided
can't have it
for.
both ways. On one hand, you can't be complaining about unemployment going up, and on the other hand, saying that employers should not be given encouragement to hire. I mean, you can't keep on saying that we want unemployment to go down, but we're not going to do anything to help it.
The economy, growing the economy, makes unemployment go down. Giving employers the right to sack people within the first 90 days doesn't create a single job.
David, they're realistically going to the point you made right at the top of this interview about apprentices, jobs being filled and vacancies being filled, because this is no one believes that these people would have carried on without these workers, without these apprentices, were it not for the 90-day rule. They'd had to have filled them. So jobs aren't really being created, are they?
Oh, well, it's really about just hiring sooner rather than later, because there's people out there who would very much like to be working today. And the fact is that many of them may not get offered jobs for 3 or 6 months down the track. And it's about just simply bringing that forward a little bit faster, because employers are quite worried about hiring people that they're not sure of. 2/3 of employers lose their personal grievance cases at the moment. So why would you take that on until the very last minute?
If the person had been employed for less than 3 months, then the penalty that an employer would face would be the matters of hundreds of dollars or $1,000 or $2,000 max. We had a case this week of a worker, an IT worker, a skilled worker, who moved his family from Wellington to Auckland for a job and was terminated within the 90 days under the current law. He asked his employer, well, can you explain to me why I've been terminated? Just don't fit. His performance was up. His sales were up, IT sales, his performance figures were fine, all the rest of it. And when he asked for an explanation from his employer why he was terminated, just the fit wasn't there.
We will thank you to you both. We will have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you very much, Mike Treen and David Lowe.